gentlemen, to the Sunday that followed Saturday and came before the Monday that never happened.
It didn't happen?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Perfect. I'll go with that. As long as it does happen.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Unless some odd force comes down and destroys the world tonight, which I don't see happening. I mean, Trump is still alive, so.
Exactly. He might bring out another emergency.
Right.
But, okay, so hi, everybody out there. This is the Bunny Rabbit's Hole, and of course, I am Jason, and this, of course, is...
I am, of course, Greg.
All right, so here at the Bunny Rabbit's Hole, what we do each and every week is we pick one theme. We read the theme, and we talk about it until something inspires us to talk about something different, and we talk about that topic until we exhaust it, or Craig finally gets tired of hearing us ramble about something, and it brings us right back to the main point in our main theme. But first, we got to get something else out of the way.
Yes, as Jason said, we pick a central topic. We do research for, we do research on both sides. Ones that fit our narrative, ones that don't fit our narrative, and then we add our opinions. This is entertainment, so we have a dark sense of humor. If you're easily offended, now's the time when you switch it off and go watch the
video. And this is where we say bye-bye, and thank you for playing, but you're not going to collect $200 for passing go.
Correct.
Okay. So, now that we got that out of the way, we told you what the show is. What is our theme today, Craig?
Our theme today is the Akashic Records. Now say it. Say it. You know you want to say it.
Akashic.
It's awesome. Those old Sanskrit words are just fucking awesome.
It's a good word. It really is. It just kind of rolls off the tongue.
Right.
Kind of like a martial arts guru talking to his pupil. Go out there and find the Akashic Records.
Right. Yes. And, we always say that we do both sides of the research, but a lot of times we forget to add the opposing views in. So we're going to start out with the opposing views today.
I think, like we talked about this a little bit before we got recorded, and we do have a tendency to forget to talk about the other viewpoint because otherwise some of these podcasts will be 3 or 4 hours long.
Right.
And we're not like Dan Carlin's Hardcore History where it's 20 hours long. We don't do that here. We try to keep it to a minimum, but I do like the idea that you pointed out that we don't talk about the other side enough. So, with that being said, I'm going to stand back. Okay, I'm just going to sit back. But I'm going to give you the floor and let you say the opposing viewpoint to the Akashic Records.
Okay, and this is what I learned in my extensive research of the opposing viewpoints of the Akashic Records. I didn't learn jack shit. Actually, what I learned is, I did find some people that opposed it and said there's no scientific proof of this, which there is, and we'll get into that later.
Yes.
But, it's these same people that believe in religious healing and stuff like that, but yet don't believe in this because they can't see it.
Right. But, like you said, there is hard science that we'll talk about later that proves the existence of the consciousness of the Akashic.
Right. And we're not talking about scientists like Sheldon. We're talking about people like Einstein and Tesla.
Yes, real fucking scientists.
Right. So with that being said, and that the opposing viewpoints out of the way, I can, in a way, I can understand a little bit because, yeah, you don't see it, you don't have the experience with it, and it's not something that, without practice, that you can just easily tap in.
Right. But, and we'll say examples and things that have ways people have tapped in and consciously and unconsciously have tapped into the records. But I think first what we ought to say is we're proving that the Akashic Records are real. But what the fuck are they? It's not some file cabinet that you have locked up in some kind of basement.
Right.
The Akashic Records, and I found a couple different definitions of them. The first one is just simply the Akashic Records are a compendium of all human events, thoughts, words, emotions, and intent ever to have occurred in the past, present, and future. They are believed by theosophists, I can't say that word, to be encoded in a non-physical plane of existence known as the ethereal plane.
Right. And I believe, because I have that written down as well, that you got that from Wikipedia.
I did, actually. I just read it right off Wikipedia.
Right. And this is something I want to point out. Wikipedia, yes, they have a lot of good stuff on there, but also on that page, it says there's no scientific evidence of their existence.
Right. And that's why I just really liked that. That sounded more like a definition. That's why I read that one.
Right.
But Edgar Casey, who we'll talk about a lot later, and we'll actually do a Edgar Casey. We're big fans of him.
Oh yeah.
But a lot of his stuff came from the Akashic Records, is where he was a prophet. He was kind of like a modern day Nostradamus. They called him the sleeping prophet because he would lay there and then he would go into this trance and he'd just start saying things and people would write stuff down. But that's here there. What he said is that collectively the Akashic Records are a field of energy that holds all the past, present, and future knowledge of all things, and it manifests everywhere at once within this all-encompassing field of our individual energy fields.
Right. And I want to throw out another more modern, for people who, something modern that people will help maybe click for people. Look at the Akashic Records as if it's the internet.
Right.
Like it's the Wi-Fi, where you can just tap into it and there's all this information at your hand.
Exactly. We know that everywhere we go, especially in developed countries, especially here in the United States, we have so many places where you get free Wi-Fi, all the McDonald's, all the Starbucks, most laundromats, all have free Wi-Fi that you can tap into. But this is like Wi-Fi that is free that you can tap into.
And it manifests everywhere all at once. And, I'm not going to try to teach you how to tap into the Akashic Records, but I will say that there are a ton of guided meditation videos on YouTube that you can just look up and they can help you do it.
Okay, so I tried one last night.
Okay, how'd it go?
Well, I was drinking at the time, so I fell asleep.
Okay.
So I didn't get very far. But you know what? I woke up this morning and I said, you know what? I probably should start researching more of this stuff. And then all the research just started coming together. So maybe it did work. I don't know.
Yeah. Did you have any dreams?
Not that I remember.
Okay. Well, and that's something that could come back later.
Yeah, I had a dream I was in prison the other day, which was really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, which just means that you have I looked up on dream interpretation. It just means that you feel that you're being stifled creatively.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So, I stifled you, Jason.
Yes, you are, Craig. God damn you.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So why does it have this weird word, Akashic? What is that? So what I found was the term Akashic Records was first coined first modern time coined in an 1883 by the author Alfred Percy Sonnet in his book Esoteric Buddhism.
Yeah.
Now, he describes how, accordingly to Eastern philosophy, the universal records physically exist in an ever-pervasive realm known as the Akasha and can be accessed by enlightened individuals.
Right. Well, and Akasha, that stems all the way back to ancient Hindu.
Yeah, so that's why I said it was coined in modern times. That's the first time that we've seen it written until we started going back and seeing a lot of these texts, because there's a couple of different, the Mahabharata and the Puranas. I think I'm slaughtered that second one.
Purana.
What?
I thought it was like Purana or Punana or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. And we're sorry that our Midwestern pronunciations of these tomes are wrong, but one of them mentions a sage known as Narada.
Yes.
Okay, so we're both there at the same time. Narada transcended his consciousness to gather knowledge and give his teachings of great wisdom. And so Narada is like one of the first, I won't say folk heroes, but one of the first people written about that like transcended into this plane of knowledge and
Right.
brought back.
Right. And he was said to have the ability to tap into the universal knowledge, also called the Akasha. The Sanskrit meaning is either in the metaphysical and elemental sense.
Exactly, and that's important because that it having it in the elemental and metaphysical sense means that it's everywhere.
Right.
To make it in its most elementary form, that just means you can find it everywhere.
Right. Yes, and it's not just. I mean, while we're back in ancient times, I want to go into unless you have more to talk about on that.
No, I just so I just wanted to throw him out there, because Narada out there, as that. Yes, in 1883, the book Esoteric Buddhism came out, and
right.
It's talking about the Akashic Records. There is written proof, or written versions of people tapping into the Akashic Records far before that book.
Right. Like, and a great example is an ancient Egyptian deity known as Thoth.
Thoth.
Thoth, yes. He wasn't actually a deity. He was actually born a human, and he was a philosopher, and he rose to godhood. But he was known to be able to tap into the Akashic Records. And before he was a god, he was the first Egyptian philosopher and founder of the ancient mystery schools, receiving his wisdom in meditative trances. He wrote over 40 books, including the Emerald Tablet, the Book of Thoth, and the Divine Time Man.
And so the thing I like about this is there's another example of somebody tapping into the Akashic Records through Thoth.
Yeah.
Okay. So everybody who listens to us, I'm pretty sure you know of or heard the name Aleister Crowley.
Yes.
Now, Aleister Crowley wrote the Book of Thoth, which is a book of mysticism and spells and enchantments and all this other stuff. But he claimed that he went in to another plane and gained the knowledge to write the Book of Thoth. Just like Thoth tapped into a higher plane of knowledge and wrote these 40 books.
Right. And
so,
no, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I don't have any more on Thoth.
So no, so it shows that this isn't just some kind of like passing fad. Like the law of attraction has been out there forever, but when Oprah picks up on the fact that the movie The Secret came out, it just exploded, and everybody starts making vision boards, and thinking happy thoughts, and dreaming of money, and whatever it is that you want to do with the law of attraction. You should go back and listen to our episode on that, because we go through all of that. But this is something that's been happening for forever.
Right.
This is essentially the law of attraction, gaining knowledge by tapping into this higher plane. And
right.
Law of attraction basically is tricking your subconscious into obtaining things, by manifesting things.
And an interesting note on the Akashic Records is it's not like, okay, I can go into a trance and I can just read all this stuff. It doesn't work that way. From what I have seen from people's experiences with it, is when they're tapping into it, they see images and stuff like that, and they're not always the right ones. I had notes on it somewhere. Where the hell did I put that? But it's you see image. It's basically, one thing Edgar Casey said, it's a database that is everywhere and holds records on everyone. So you could be tapping into somebody else's Akashic record.
exactly. It's just a huge, vast knowledge of everything. It's everything that's ever happened. It's everything that will happen, and it's everything that's happening now.
Right.
It's all of that, and it's floating around us as we speak. It's kind of like the source code. You know, like when Neo in the Matrix is looking down the hallway and he's trying to find the architect. He's looking down the hallway and he can't see, but he's seeing nothing but binary ones and zeros all the way down the hall, and he can tell where everything is. It's kind of like it, that's it's kind of what that is.
Right.
Everything
Right.
else.
And another interesting person that is involved in the Akashic Records, and this is what I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about her, but then I'm going to talk about something else that I believe needs to be talked about, especially because it ties into all this.
Okay.
But there was a Russian lady named H.P. Blavatsky.
Yes.
And they call her a Russian occultist. And I want to talk about the occultist version. Anything that people don't understand, they chalk it up to the occult.
Yeah.
And they get a bad rap. I would more say that somebody like that was a spiritualist.
Uh-huh.
I think it's a better term to use.
Yeah. She wrote books that inspired a lot of people for good and a lot of people for bad.
Right.
One of her people that she really touched was Himmler.
Okay. Yeah.
Hitler's right hand man, the chief architect of the SS. He was really into the occult, and her writings is what inspired him to go on, because she had 7 levels of a human existence.
Right.
And that's where the term Aryan race came from.
Right.
Is her writings. So she is a very powerful. Her teachings are very powerful.
Right. And she characterized the Akasha as a sort of life force.
Hmm.
And she goes on and she describes it the same as Edgar Cayce does. Another thing the Akashic Records is also known as is the collective unconsciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have this other thing that kind of goes into what I was saying a little bit earlier. Think of the Akashic Records as an immense photographic film registering the desire and earth experiences of our planet. Those who perceive it will see pictures thereon, the life experience of every human being since time began, the reactions to experience of the entire animal kingdom, the aggregation of the thoughts, forms of a karmic nature based on desire of every human unit throughout time. Herein lies the great deception of the records. Only a trained occultist, again, I'm going to say spiritualist, can distinguish between actual experience and those astral pictures created by imagination and keen desire. Now, another person back in 1927 wrote a book. Her name was Alice Bailey, and the book was The Light of the Soul on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Book 3, Union Achieved and Its Results. And I believe that what I just read came from that book.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. I didn't I didn't go into that part of the research. So that's cool. I like that.
I like that definition, even though it's very long.
Yeah.
But I like that definition because it touches on what I was talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to read another quote, and this kind of backs up the scientific version of it. And this is a quote from Tesla.
Okay.
The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, the day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its
existence. I read that one too, and I loved that quote. Now, so you brought up Tesla.
Yes.
And I want to piggyback off of that real quick, because okay. I think we went down this wormhole, the rabbit's hole, if you will, of spiritualism, occultism, and stuff. And I think that some people listening may go, I thought you said this shit was real. Because there's a lot of people that don't believe in that type of stuff. So I want to talk about some of the proof real quick.
Yes.
Okay. So there was so Tesla studied he studied okay, that was that quote again. I'm reading through my notes real quick. Okay, so there was a celebrated futurist and Nobel Prize nominee, Dr. Irving Laszlo, announced that he had evidence to prove evidence of the Akashic field.
Yes.
Okay. So Dr. Laszlo took from his work the discovery of a quantum zero-point energy, which is a radiation field that exists around us that we can't perceive, but we can detect it indirectly.
Right.
The existence of quantum zero-point energy is a very solid theory or theoretical, and it was discovered by Einstein.
Right.
Know that zero-point energy exists, and it creates a lot of information about the universe in it. Dr. Laszlo purported that it didn't carry just physical information about physics of the universe, but also contained intellectual information.
Right.
So that's a Nobel Prize winner and Einstein, and Tesla talked about them talking about this. So we have three very brilliant individuals. Probably two of them are two of the smartest humans to ever walk our planet.
Right.
Tesla and Einstein. So using math that I couldn't even begin to comprehend, I don't even understand the numbers and their placements on the piece of paper. But they proved that there's the zero-point energy is real, and it contains information. Not only does it contain the physical information of the universe, it also contains intellectual information.
Right. And to kind of go off that, according to physicists who are far smarter than I am, far smarter than you are, they study this stuff. But according to them, the fabric of space itself is made up of energy and information. It propagates through waves we call quantum waves. The Akashic field is made of quantum waves that are common to all intelligent life.
Yes.
So that kind of goes right along with what you were saying on that. If these scientists are saying this is real, I'm more apt to listen to them than somebody who posts a blog that says it's bullshit.
And if you did want to take two of the smartest people that ever walked our planet, plus a Nobel Prize winning physicist, how about we throw another Nobel Prize winning physicist in there just for good measure?
Let's do it.
This one is Dr. Richard Feynman. Feynman. Now, he published his groundbreaking work in quantum physics, that the strange theory of light and matter. He explored the idea that electrons in our brains can be activated by and informed by quantum waves, affecting our thoughts and subconscious. So, if our brains can be affected by protons or electrons, and the zero-point energy contain information, wouldn't it mean that we could have our brains affected by the electrons that are in the zero-point energy that are hitting our brain? Couldn't it help us learn stuff?
Very well could, which is going to lead me back to another Tesla quote.
Perfect.
And this Tesla says, "My brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there is a core. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time reading my handwriting. There is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. I have not penetrated into the secrets of this core, but I know that it exists."
Yeah, I mean, there you go. So we had two Nobel Prize winning physicists and two of the smartest people in the world that are humans ever. Two of the smartest humans that ever walked our planet.
Right.
Are all saying it's real, people.
Yeah, and there's the one of the things that I found that I thought was really, really cool is there's these two people, William Ogburn and Dorothy Thomas, and they published a paper in the Political Science Journal titled "Are Inventions Inevitable? A Note on Social Evolution." And in it, they cite 148 simultaneous inventions where two or more individuals working without knowledge of each other's work came up with the same groundbreaking innovation or theory at the same time and applied to copyright.
Yes.
And I'm going to give you a couple examples.
All right.
All right, you got Scott de Martinville from France and Thomas Edison from the U.S. Both came up with a phonograph at the same time.
Right.
Einstein's theory of relativity came out at the same time as a Frenchman named Poincare.
Okay.
And the last one I'm going to use is Tesla and Marconi came up with the radio at the same time.
Yeah. I got a few more
Go for it.
on there. The microchip, two people invented that at the same time. I don't have the names of them. I just wrote down what they were.
Okay.
So I'll just read through them real quick. The microchip, the identity of electricity, and the lightning rod were both done at the same time. One of them you may know by Benjamin Franklin, but there was a French guy that did it at the same time. Proof that neutrinos have mass. The discovery of the stratosphere, that was 3 days apart. The ATM, automated teller machines, two people invented those at the same time. The discovery of oxygen, the first jet engine, which is kind of an interesting story. There were two guys on opposite sides of the war, and they created the jet engine at the same time. And then after the war, they met.
Nice.
Yeah. The chromosomal sex determination. So the people figuring out that XY and XX were, men and women. Two people came up at the same time. Polycarbonate was at the same time. The periodic table, which I'll say that one for later. The television, there were 5 different people who came up with the television in the 1920s. One of them was a farm kid.
Philo T. Farnsworth.
Yeah, he had no training whatsoever, but somehow he tapped into knowledge that he shouldn't have had. And we're going to talk about a bunch of people like that. And then the last one was the film projector.
Right.
But like with the kid tapping in there to help create is the television. Same thing happened with the periodic table. Both people claim to have dreamt about it. And at the same time, roughly the same time.
Right.
But this isn't okay. So we're looking at like things like, the microchip, things like the airplane that was done at the same time, the Wright brothers, and then there was a guy from Ohio also.
Right. And mind you, people, these are times, like especially with Tesla and stuff like that, where you didn't have the internet. These people were on different sides of the world. There was no way that they knew. I mean, they couldn't like scout their secrets online or anything like that to find their information. They didn't know that somebody else was working on the same thing they were working on.
Right. And so some people just call it like it's in the air.
Right.
It's in the air. And I'll give you a pulp culture reference, Nat, to help people understand this a little bit better. Is a lot of times pretty much the same movie comes out the same summer.
Right.
And I have a few examples of this. The biggest one that I remember is in '98. It was Armageddon with Bruce Willis and Deep Impact, both about asteroids about ready to hit the Earth.
Right.
Okay? But in '95, there was Babe and Gordy, both movies about little pigs. There's The Prestige and The Illusionist, which were both about, magic in the turn of, earlier in the century. There's Chasing Liberty and First Daughter, which are both about the president having a kid. Volcano, Dante's Peak, Ants in a Bug's Life, Turner and Hooch and Canine, and then Olympus Has Fallen and White House Down.
Right.
So those, there's tons of them. There's way more than out there, but those are the first ones I found when I was just doing this.
And I actually have a personal experience on this that at the time I didn't know about. I just thought it was weird. It was a coincidence. But I was in a band years ago, and I wrote this song, and the song was called Bleeding Me.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were practicing the song. I had somebody else singing it, and then it was like 3 weeks later, Metallica released the song Until It Sleeps on radio. And the music to them were identical.
Weird.
And I'd never heard the song before. And actually, after I heard Metallica's version, I liked their version better, so I just gave up on mine.
Nice.
But it was just weird because the harmony and the melody and everything were the same. and I'd never heard the song before. And like I said, their album hadn't even been released when I started playing when I wrote the song.
Oh wow.
And so years later, the guy that I was singing the song, him and I worked together, and we were sitting down in the break room, and I started talking to him about that. And this was the first time somebody was trying to clue me in on it, but he didn't call it the Akashic Records. What
Mm-hmm.
he said was, as artists, we tap into this field, this creative field, and we all pull from it. And sometimes two people pull the same thing from it.
Mm.
And then I hadn't even heard the term Akashic fields until talking to you on the phone probably a couple months ago.
Mm.
But I knew of it. I just didn't know what it was called.
Right. Everybody has a name for it, or they've heard about it. They've they can relate to it. They've had an experience with it. It's not a new thing. It's not a new fad. It's something that's been out there. But some people tap into it, and for very weird reasons. And one that I found was sometimes trauma can transform you.
Right.
And there was a guy outside of Tacoma, Washington, who got mugged, and he was beaten pretty badly. He was left with a concussion. He was hospitalized for a couple of days. But while he's sitting in his hospital bed, he starts looking around, and he's seeing mathematical formulas everywhere, like a beautiful mind.
Oh wow.
Type of things. So he went from having essentially a high school level knowledge of mathematics to being able to hand draw fractals.
Oh wow.
And teach people about it. He
Right.
went from just being a high school level mathematician to being a mathematician.
Right. Well, and
because
even Casey and Blavatsky, they both talk about it and say that some things that key into it key you into it is a near death experience.
Mhm.
That they said that people when they experience a near death experience, some of these people are able to tap into this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not saying go out and try and just barely miss getting hit by a bus or anything like that, but
no, exactly not. But there are tons of different things about people gaining special abilities, like waking up from a coma and all of a sudden you speak another language.
right.
So how is that possible? Well, it's possible if you believe that there is something like the Akashic Records, that you've just tapped into something else without your knowledge. Like there was a guy who got into, I think it was a car accident. Now this is coming from the top. I didn't research this. I remember reading this a long time ago. He was in a coma for something. I don't remember what. But when he woke up, he didn't speak the same language, and he didn't understand English anymore. He was speaking Portuguese or something, and he was getting frustrated because he recognized his family, but he couldn't communicate with them anymore. So he had to learn English all over again.
Do you think that's possible that maybe he had tapped into a past life, or maybe he was Portuguese in a past life?
That is very, very possible, or a future version of himself.
Right. Because, like we said before, the Akashic Records isn't just the past, but it's also the future.
Yes. Now, there's probably one of the best known versions of like the mathematician thing is, and I'm going to slaughter this guy's name. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say his last name is Ramajan. He was a mathematician from India, and this is back when Britain occupied. There's British rule in India, but he had no formal training in mathematics whatsoever. And at early age, when he was 16, he was reading books on math that I couldn't even read the covers to.
Right.
But because of where he lived, he didn't really have access to the knowledge that he needed to further his stuff. So he had these notebooks, and he gave one of the notebooks to a professor from Cambridge, and he was blown away. And then when they got him to Cambridge to study, he said he started He produced groundbreaking new theorems, including some that Harley said had defeated him and his colleagues completely. Now, Hardy was the dean of the mathematics college at Cambridge. And here is a kid who had no formal training in mathematics, was um, he was solving problems that at the time were considered unsolvable. He made substantial contributions to mathematical analysis, number theory, infinite series, and continued fractions. Now, I don't even know what any of that shit is really, and I consider myself a fairly intelligent human, but this kid had no formal training, just understood math. How?
It's straight up Goodwill Hunting right there.
Right. Exactly. But unfortunately he only died at the age of 32. So he didn't really get to, he could have helped our world tremendously.
Oh, most definitely. What did he die of? Do you know?
He had he had an operation when he was younger, and the problem came back, and it was like leakage in his scrotal sac. Yeah, so I didn't really want to bring it up, but it was not a fun way to die.
I was just wondering, maybe was he killed off, or because he used too much,
No.
and he
But
could be too much help.
there's a lot of different stories about people doing this. Now, one I want to talk about real quick about the seeing the future. Now, this is what Edgar Casey would do. Is he said he would tap into the Akashic Records and he could predict the future.
Right.
Now, there was in 1923, there was a 12-year-old Bulgarian girl named her name was Van Gaia, and she was playing in a field when a tornado come up and lifted her and flung her away. Now, later she was found by her parents, barely alive, and she ended up being blinded by this thing.
Yeah,
But
she had dirt and grime caked over her eyes, and she had several surgeries, but she never regained her eyesight.
yeah, but eventually she adopted the name Baba Vanga, and she became a prophet,
Right.
and she predicted quite a few things. I'm trying to. Where's the list? She predicted the day of Stalin's death, which she actually spent some time in prison for.
Yep.
She predicted 9/11, the nuclear explosion at Chernobyl, the Indian Sea tsunami, the sinking of the Russian submarine, the Kursk, and a bunch of other world-changing events.
Right.
So
now there are some video. You'll find some videos on YouTube where people try to debunk her, but they don't actually use any sort of proof. They're just saying it's bullshit because they don't believe.
they're using the no, you didn't.
Right. It basically comes down to I'm too lazy to research it myself, so I'm just gonna say I don't believe it. You're full of shit.
Right. Now, I will say this though. I was watching the show about Nostradamus, and they had, for some reason, Penn and Teller were on the show. It was a History Channel thing, and Penn and Teller were on there. And Penn Jillette said, he was talking about that Nostradamus predicted 9/11. Now, he was saying, now, wait a minute. Where were you on 9/10? I think everybody that knew that this, that they were predicting, that he predicted this, you, for not sharing this information, you should be culpable for it as well, because you had early proof that this happened.
Well, he's not the only one that had early proof that it happened. I mean, the government workers that worked in the building were told not to show up to work that day.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird things that happened that day. We'll do an episode on that one.
Yeah, that's down the line ways.
Yeah, that because there's a lot of weird shit. Like, why the fuck did Building 7 fall? Nothing hit it.
Right.
But anyway, that's a side story. That we'll bring it back to this one here because I can go on for hours on that shit.
Me too. So, do you have any personal experiences with it, Jason?
So I do, actually. But not like I didn't learn a new language overnight. I didn't learn mathematics. You know, I'm not great at science. Uh, Mine were just little things where you think about something, and then a day later, a week later, maybe a year later, it's there. You see it.
Right.
You know, and for me, a lot of it was sayings. You know, I come up with a nickname for somebody or put a spin on a popular saying, and then you know I would say it a couple of times to myself or to to my close group of friends, and then next thing you know I'm seeing it on TV.
Yeah,
The
I've had
exact
that
same,
happen too.
the exact same way. It's like that's weird. Uh, I mean, they're just little things, but
Right. And a lot of times you chalk it up as a coincidence,
yes.
you know. But the reality is, I don't really put much stock in coincidences. I believe things happen for a reason, and I think that because I've had the same thing where I'll come up with something really clever and think I'm the shit for it, and then I'll
Mhm.
hear it a couple weeks later, like on the radio or on TV or something like that.
Movie ideas is another
Right.
one. You know, so it's been a lot of it's just like little things, but it's enough to chalk it up a little bit more than a coincidence.
Right. Right. And especially because it happens once, okay, but when it happens multiple times, then there's something a little bit more going on, and you really have to sit back and think of it. And you know, they say that only those who become enlightened can really access the Akashic records, and the only way to truly be enlightened, become enlightened, in my view, I don't know the exact way, but in my view, is through self introspection, learning to be a better version of you, and instead of getting pissed off about everything, just loving people for where they're at in their life, but realizing just because you love them doesn't mean they need to be a part of your life, and just try to live the best version of you can. And I believe that can lead you towards enlightenment.
Right. And you mentioned it earlier about there's guided meditations on YouTube to help you tap into the Akashic records. Now, like I said, I tried one last night, but the first one I watched, there was one that was 5 minutes with the lady talking, and the other one was like an hour.
Yeah.
And it was just music and whatever. But so I watched the 5 minute one first, and you guys will see this. You like one of the first things she comes out and says is, "Well, I don't know how to tap into it." What? But really, what she was trying to say is the main way to get there is through meditation.
Right.
And um, going through the meditation part is probably you'll find if you research how to get there, most people say meditation. And one of the biggest proponents of meditating to get to tap into this knowledge was Steve Jobs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's the oldest Japanese garden that's in California. He used to go there and meditate, and that's where the idea for the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, and the iMac all came to him while he was meditating there. Now, I've poo-pooed Jobs multiple times and multiple platforms about people about saying about what a great genius he was, because he didn't really my whole thing with Steve Jobs is Wozniak did most of the coding. He just sold the product. He was a great marketer, but
Right.
he did have the idea for the iPod, the iPhone, and all these things, but he had engineers make them.
Right.
So if I could come up with a lot of shit and just say, hey, I want a little glass device that I can touch and it will want to revolutionize how phones work. Make it happen.
Right. Well, but everything has to start with an idea.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say is that I poo-poo him as being this genius, but he was a visionary to see that he could revolutionize the mobile device.
Right.
And so with that, the whole concept of a smartphone, there's a great theory about this whole thing is that the smartphone has now become the third hemisphere of our brain because we have instant access to infinite information.
Right.
As long as we have Wi-Fi. But
right.
but what goes with that is it's kind of like we already had access to infinite information. We just have to tap into it.
Exactly.
How to tap into it.
And sometimes you'll accidentally tap into it.
Yeah.
And being an artist and being a musician and stuff like that. Like I said, I wrote that song, then Metallica came out with it 3 weeks later, and it was the first release off the Black Album. But it's those ideas, they come to you and you run with them, and then you see somebody else has done it and they did it better, so you're like, well, shit. But it doesn't mean stop trying. It doesn't mean stop trying to tap into that, because when you can tap into something like that, you're going to be able to become a better version of yourself. And isn't that what life is truly about anyways?
Exactly. And I want to throw this out there. How many times have you, and I'm asking you personally and our listeners, because I already know my response to this. How many times have you been frustrated by a problem, or like you get stuck on something and then you walk away only to come back to it later and the answer is the perfect answer is right there?
Oh, thousands of times.
Exactly. I do it all the fucking time. So where did that answer come from in the meantime?
Right. You sit there and you think on something, but the solution usually just pops into your brain. I mean, the perfect example is I have a commission work that I've been working on for about a week and a half now, and I got really frustrated with it. I scrapped it. I'm actually on my 4th draft of it, but this 4th draft is going to be the final draft because it finally clicked.
There you go. See, and I do that with web design and coding, doing back end stuff. It's like sometimes you think about the logical steps that you think that a program should go, and then it's just not working. It's just not working. Then try to find the answer, and then you're stuck on your version of how it should go, and then you're trying to research answers to that, but you're not finding the right answers. And then you walk away as you're pissed off, and then you come back and you went, oh shit, that was simple.
Right. And that's happened to me so many times in my life. And us as human beings who at the time didn't know about the Akashic Records just think, hey, I'm a genius. I figured that out. Honestly, you're not a genius. It was you tapped into the Akashic
Records. Right?
I mean, very few of us are geniuses. I mean, there's only so many Teslas and Einsteins and Elon Musk in the world.
Exactly. There's, they say that an IQ test of over 140, you're technically a genius, but I think we should we throw that word around too much.
Yes.
And
especially stable genius.
Yeah, I know people that have high IQs that I would not call a genius because fuck, they're stupid sometimes.
Right. Well, and the thing is too, it's like people are like, I got a high IQ, I'm a genius, but you have no fucking common sense.
Right.
Why'd you walk into the fucking door if you're so goddamn smart? Why didn't you just open it first?
Exactly. How many times are you going to get out of your car without taking your seatbelt off first?
Right. Or putting it in park.
That too.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is really so much to this. And like we say on most podcasts, we are merely scratching the surface. Please go out yourself and start researching this. And I'm going to warn you right now, if you're doing it on YouTube, you're going to run into a bunch of crackpots, because I think I turned off probably about 10 videos because I either the voice drove me nuts, or I just thought they were fucking bizarre as hell, and I didn't really count them as serious research. So this is one I actually did mostly reading instead of watching videos.
There you go. I did a lot of reading on this one, but I did find one YouTube video we'll link to it in the show notes, that I thought was a pretty good history about it.
That's the one where you found out about the Maharaba and stuff.
Yeah,
I watched the same one. Yeah, that one I liked.
so that one was pretty good. It's about a half hour. So, but it's
that's also the one that had the two people that wrote the paper and had all the examples.
Yes, yeah. So that was a good one. But then I went down the rabbit hole of watching Ancient Aliens.
Okay.
They have the episode of Genie's Factor. It's in season 9, episode 3. It's in season 9, episode 2 or 3.
Okay.
One of the so they talk about Thoth and the Akashic Records, and they talk about the mathematician I mentioned before, the Indian guy. But they always have to pull up. Well, they bring out the whole thing as whether is the Akashic Records just grand design by a superior alien race, and they're just pumping the information to us. Now, an interesting spin on the whole thing was the dual inventions. Was what if something happened to one of the inventors? They, by grand design, it's going to be invented at that particular time in history because we have multiple people working on it at the same time. Right. And they go on to try to say that, because one of the ancient alien theories is that we were manufactured here, and we're just basically like an ant farm.
Right. But I mean, I can kind of see where they're going with that. But as the physicist said, I mean, the universe is made up of energy and information.
Right.
So, yes, these alien races are probably tapping into the same Akashic Records we're tapping into.
Right. Exactly. So bringing it back to like the we'll get away from the aliens thing before we've done enough episodes on those. Yeah. There's a writer in the early 20th century named William Waddles, and we talked about him on our law of attraction thing. He has a theory that everything is energy, and thoughts are energy, and everything else is energy. So if everything is energy and your thoughts are energy, or energy waves or whatever, then your thoughts can become things.
Right.
And so I thought it was kind of interesting how it sort of correlates with the information is all around us. If right. Our thoughts are energy and everything else is made of the same energy, we are made of the information. Maybe we already have the information within inside us. We just have to learn to tap into it.
And, I found something else too, because remember in our crystals episode where we talked about how crystals hold data, basically store data from the earth for years. But crystals also hold the Akashic Records.
I'm so glad. I'm glad that you said that, because earlier in this episode, I was thinking about, for some reason, the crystal skulls came into my head. And then the crystal skull, when I was talking about the amount of information in my head, I'm thinking about the amount of information that could have been stored in one of those crystal skulls.
Right. And
here you are, you bring up crystals like 30 minutes later. See, we're tapping into something.
Yeah, we are.
We're here, folks. It happened live. You just saw it. You just heard it. You just witnessed it.
It's true. God damn it.
No, but you're right that the crystals can hold all this sort of information. And if you don't know, an actual crystal can store way more information than what your computer can.
Right. Didn't we say in the crystal episode that it could hold information equal to like 9,000 iPhones or something like that?
Yeah, it was something crazy. Something crazy. And like you also mentioned in the crystal episode, you explain how you have to release that energy or release that information,
right,
from the crystal, because you store negative um, vibes,
Right.
and you have to release that information.
Right. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with the Akashic Records. I mean, if you're it all this it's strange because all this stuff that we talked about in some of these episodes, the law of attraction, um, the chaos magic, the crystals, the Akashic Records, these are all tied together, because one of them always leads to another. And whenever we talk about something like that, it's hard for us not to go back to these previous episodes that we've recorded and will be released eventually. But they all tie together, and they can all be used for really good things. They don't use them for bad because you're just fucking yourself when you do
them. Exactly. If that's how the Star Trek universe, that's how they developed, and how they became this great society. Earth became like the center of of the Federation, because we got away from the pursuit of financial to the pursuit of knowledge.
Right. And that's what it really should be about. I mean, if you think you think I don't need to learn anything else, well, you're a fucking idiot, and you're just part of the problem.
Exactly. One of the things in that, we talked about the one YouTube video that we both liked about it, was they mentioned the main purpose for working in your Akashic Records is to not receive mandates about what to do with your life or how to live it, but to provide information, knowledge, and wisdom, or to provide you with information, knowledge, and wisdom. You need to broaden your perspective, allowing you to make healthier choices. In other words, working with the energy of the Akashic Records provides you with the support you need to grow and evoke personally and spiritually.
Right. And I want to kind of go off on a little funny rabbit hole here, just a quick one. Now, we talk about all this stuff. We talk about enlightenment. We talk about positive energy. We're not perfect. I've spent the last couple of days living in ego instead of living outside of ego and trying to be a better person. We all fall back sometimes, but it's like I said earlier, it's that self-introspection to realize that what you're doing, stop it, change it, and go back on the right path.
Exactly. Like I'm far from perfect. I mean, fuck, ask my wife. But it's just knowing when there's a problem or when you get off path is that makes you a better person right there. When you understand that you're straying and you need to get back, leave yourself a breadcrumb trail, find your way back, but you will find your way back. Those that find their way back learn from it.
Right, exactly. And and we've talked before about in other episodes about reprogramming your brain, and tapping into the Akashic Records is a great way to do it. But when we find it, when we find ourselves getting in these confrontations and stuff like that, that's living in the ego, and it's comfortable, and it raises your ire and gets you fired up, and you're angry, and angry is a comfort zone for so many people, especially in today's society. And we need to break away from that and realize all that anger is doing is just killing
us. Exactly. Now, there was a Japanese physicist that proved that negative energy influences water molecules. Now, this is actually kind of the basis for the plot to Ghostbusters 2.
Okay.
Because in there they had positive and negatively charged slime. When they talked nice to the slime, it reacted one way. When they yelled at it, it bubbled over and it went nuts. But what he did was he did these same experiments in a controlled environment. He had students talk nice to water molecules or water droplets as they were freezing. And when they talked nice to them, they came out in perfect, just beautiful, like snowflakes, ice crystals. But when they talk negatively to them, now keep in mind that these are being frozen within a sealed container, so their voices, nothing but just the energy could get to them. They weren't spitting on them, they weren't, they weren't blowing on them or anything like that. When they talked negatively to them, they came out distorted.
Huh.
So negative energy actually does affect the physical world.
Which would also explain why Himmler wanted to tap into the Akashic Records, because he wanted to use it, get that negative stuff out of there so he could develop more weapons and shit like that.
Exactly. Yeah, there was in. I'm glad you kind of brought up the Nazis for a second. It's probably the one and only time that in human history anybody's ever said those lines. I'm glad you brought up the Nazis.
Right.
But their scientists were, they were getting their knowledge from somewhere, because in World War II they were creating weapons and doing technological advances in stuff that were unprecedented. And if you don't believe me, look up Operation Paperclip, which was post World War II. We flooded into Germany and stole as many top scientists as we could, gave them American citizenship, brought them over here, and put them to work. Now, the reason that we went in there and got as many as we could is because Russia was doing the same thing, because something was going on within that tiny little country that's the size of Wisconsin that was creating technology that was just mind-boggling for the time. Now,
breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough.
Yeah, one of the things that they created was, one of the scientists that they brought over was a man named Werner von Braun. Now, there's a lot of speculation about it, saying that he would have worked for the highest paying government at the time. Germany was the highest paying government, even though he was a German citizen. He was in the Nazi party. We brought him over here, but he is the one that developed our space program. He created the Saturn rocket, which sent people into space to the moon and whatever. The largest and most powerful rocket ever built by man was built from the mind of this guy. He actually went from being a Nazi to being on Wonderful World of Disney.
Okay.
teaching kids about rockets and how we can project. He worked with Walt Disney and created this whole thing about trying to get kids interested in space travel, like Space Force, but for the 50s.
Well, in the odd thing is, I'm going to interject real quick. The odd thing is that was at that time period, after World War II, was when sci-fi, science fiction novels and stuff like that really launched, and kids at the time were already fascinated with that.
Right. Because right around then is when we had, shortly after the wars, when we had Roswell, and then the flight in around Mount Rainier up in Washington, where the guy coined the term flying saucer, and then
Right.
War of the Worlds was shortly after that. It just went off the rails. But I think that's kind of a manifest of multiple people collectively checking into this record all at the same time.
Right. And so if you've got that many people, somebody taught them all how to do
it. Exactly. And, Himmler used Blavatsky's teachings to probably influence their scientists in how to find this information. They had to have done something,
right.
Because it's just not feasible that many smart people would have been in that small of a collection of humans.
Right. But it's fascinating, though. Really, I mean, I'm not trying to talk about how great the Nazi Party were and stuff like that, but the fact that they were able to tap into this stuff, and the rest of the world are like, we're so far behind them.
Right, and we've done it post World War II. We have all the stuff that went on at Groom Lake, Area 51. The creation of of all the, you know, the shit that we've created in the last 75 years.
Right.
It's crazy. Like, I remember reading or watching a interview with a Lockheed engineer, and he was developing specialized planes for the, you know, for the Air Force. And one of the things that he created, or he worked on, was like the SR-71 Blackbird, and you know, and all its predecessors. Well, in the early '80s, there was this movie called Firefox. It was a Clint Eastwood movie where the Russians had this super plane, and Clint Eastwood was sent over there to steal it. Now, he went to see this engineer went to see it with his friends, and as they're walking out of this thing, now keep in mind this is like 81, 82. It had to been 82, but when they're walking out of the theater, there's his friends are talking about, man, would it be so cool that, you know, if we had something like that. Well, at the time, he's like, yeah, that would be cool. But at the time, he's developing the B-2 bomber, an invisible bomber. The only thing that the Clint Eastwood plane had was it was really fucking fast. So, you know, so it's this, you know, I'm not saying that every scientist or every smart person has tapped into this thing. You know, some people just learn by reading books, but
Let's use here's one that, you know, kind of hits home for you and I. With what was it, Gene Roddenberry, who did Star Trek, right?
yeah.
Okay. They're little flip things. Beam me up, Scotty.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden we have flip phones, like 20 years later.
Right. And now we have Dick Tracy wristwatches.
Yep. You know, so I mean, we were able. We had visionaries who came up with ideas, and we were able to turn it into something else.
Exactly. A lot of you go back and watch a lot of that old sci-fi stuff. A lot of that stuff is reality now, or it's technology that's behind us. Like, I started watching Logan's Run. It's on Netflix now, which, if you've never seen it, Michael York classic. It's a great movie where as soon as you hit 29, you die. But he didn't want to die, so his little crystal was starting to go off, and he's like, fuck you, I'm not dying. But it's this future world that you're looking at, and it's still got like the red Texas Instrument calculator scrolling screens in the background. It's like, you know, this is the future, man. We got full on LED televisions now.
Right.
Fuck, we got stadiums that have televisions that are, you know, 75 yards long. Come on, give it a
yeah. I mean, I remember going to see Rush at the Joe Louis Arena, and where I was basically in the nosebleed, so I was basically watching Rush on the Titantron.
I've seen plenty of concerts on television while I was there.
Right. Yeah. DTE that used to be called whatever. God, what is it? When we were younger, we went to some
Pine Knob.
Yeah, it used to be Pine Knob, but now it's a DTE or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, if you're on the hill and it's dusk, you cannot see the stage. You have to watch the screen up top.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes on that is unexplainable. And instead of people going, well, it's bullshit because you can't explain it, why not embrace the fact that some things can be unexplainable and they're good?
Right. We mock what, as humans, we mock what we don't understand.
Exactly.
And it, like we've already talked about, 0 point energy is real. Einstein told us this, and it carries information. A Nobel-winning scientist told you this, and the information isn't just physical, but intellectual. Another Nobel Prize physicist told us about that, and then another really smart guy, Tesla, said, "It's all fucking true, asshole."
Right. Not only that, but we have ancient Egyptian Thoth who became a god because he was able to tap into this. Which, I mean, he probably really
And Aleister Crowley tapped into just his knowledge and became the wickedest man ever.
Right. So I mean, there is so much there's so much to everything, and people need to just stop just looking at the surface and go a little bit deeper. You know, there's reasons why people think the way they think. Instead of just condemning them for thinking that way, why not try to understand why they think that way? And you know, I'm guilty of this as well. I'm not a big fan of Trump or his supporters, and a lot of times I'll just class them all, just throw them all in a hat as that. But honestly, I would rather understand why they think the way they do. But I would rather them use facts instead of just pure propaganda.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a big thing right there is understanding what just because the information comes to you doesn't necessarily mean that it's true.
Right. Right. So I think we've pretty much. Do you have more to add to this?
No. I think we've pretty much dug that one.
So the summary. Today's episode was about the Akashic Records. We talked a little bit about the history of it. We talked about the science behind it. We talked about the skeptics behind it. All that shit. If there is something that you would love to hear us talk about, throw a comment out there. See if you would like to see us do a Patreon page where people could subscribe to it, and we'd just do things just for them on Patreon. Let us know. You know, we'll probably end up doing it anyways, but you know, throw out some ideas for what you want us to talk about, because I mean, we've got a list, but we're more than happy to add yours to the list if we think it's cool.
Because like you, like us, we like to learn. And if we have to tap into these records, or we have to open a fucking book or a website or watch a movie, watch videos, whatever, we enjoy learning. That's why we started this podcast. That's why we're doing this podcast. And that's why we hope you enjoy listening to this podcast, because we enjoy learning and we hope that you enjoy learning as well.
I got to tell you, I watch more stuff for research than I do actual TV anymore. I don't even watch hardly any shows at all. It's mostly research.
Right. I watch, up way too late watching YouTube. And it's funny because you start watching something like, well, that's stupid.
Yep.
And then 10 minutes more goes through there. It's like, well, oh, it's a commercial break. Okay, now I can change it. Something finally snapped and I'm out of it.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, as everybody says, you know, follow us on our socials, which will be listed down below. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your enemies.
Right.
If you hate us, tell your enemies.
Yeah. But just remember that, just remember.
Yeah. So,
learn.
With that being said, love you guys. Peace out.
All right. Insert tagline here. You all have a good week.